Titans almost made a comeback after half-time. Dolphins still holding it together though. I don't know if you saw. Come on. That was a tough victory, but we'll take the tough ones. Cost us our best player. I don't know how the rest of the season's going to go, but fins up, fins up. My name's Michael, if you've not met me. I'm a teacher by trade. I've been coming to church here since the first day it opened. And it's my pleasure to do a message with you today. If church is new to you, we do songs at the beginning, we do a bit of Bible stuff, which is what I'm about to do now, and then we do a song at the end, and then we hang out afterwards and say hello and get to know each other, because church is not just an event, it's a community. And this week and next week, we are just going to do a short two-part series covering a chunk of the Bible right at the beginning about a dude named Joseph, which is a famous Genesis story that you probably have heard of. Even if church world is not familiar to you, there's literally a musical about it. But to get you kind of in the frame, I thought what we're actually going to do is we're going to focus on this whole thing. It's going to be about family. We're going to really zero in on that. I don't know what your family's like, but I'm part of a family. I'm a Gilliver, and my wife was a Pullman. And when we were dating, I got to discover something different about her family from my family at a special event where families really show who they really are. Christmas. It was about a week before, maybe 2 weeks before, and it was put up the Christmas tree day at the Pullman household. And at the Gilliver household, the put up the Christmas tree day, no one cares about. Someone does it, it gets done. It's a bit of a mess. It looks fine. We're all happy. End of story. At the Pullman household, it's like a ritual. It's like a really important thing that everyone participates in. There is this part where we get all the ornaments out of the box, and then we have to tell the story of every ornament before we put it on the tree. And I'm there just going bang, bang, and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Did you know that particular ornament was? And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, learning. And then things really went wrong. Because I found the star, and I thought, there's the star that goes on the top, I'm just going to put it on the top. It's like if there was a DJ playing while this was going, at the moment I put the star on the tree, it's like the DJ went, and everyone just went dead quiet and looked at me. I had done a cardinal sin that I was not aware of, because it was the dad's job to put the star on the... I didn't know this. Some of you are looking at me like, you idiot, that's obviously how it works. I didn't know. I just thought if you were the one who found it in the box, you just put it on the tree. It has now, every year since then, we bring up the story about the time Michael put the star on the tree. It is now part of the ritual that we make fun of the son-in-law because he got it wrong. I don't know if you've got your own version of getting it wrong when you're joining another family, or when they're trying to join your family and you start to work out, oh, it turns out my family has all these weird idiosyncrasies as well, and we're all a bit messed up and broken. Family is both the source of probably, I hope for all of us here, one of the sources of the greatest joys in your life. Most of the best moments of my life have been in the presence of my family. But we also know it can be the source of the greatest wounding and the hardest days. Family can heal and mess us up. And I know what you're thinking, so good, I'm so glad that someone's going to finally talk about all those other dysfunctional families and how they need to sort their stuff. No, we all know that there's a bit of dysfunction in every family. But it is also something that's not very often talked about in church. I don't think I've ever heard a talk about family dysfunction before. And I've been going to church for a while now. So this is new territory for me. It might be new territory for you, but it's not new territory for the Bible. We often will tell the story of the Bible by the famous individuals throughout and what their story was in relation to God. In every single case, bar none, every single case, those individuals were in a family. And their story was directly tied to the family that they grew up within. Literally, God calls himself Father and chose to bring Jesus to the world through a family. Family is like a core building block of the Bible, and it's a core building block of you and I, and we don't talk about it often enough. So we're going to talk about it through the lens of Joseph. Quick background to the story of Joseph if you don't know it. Joseph was the son of a dude named Jacob. This is probably around 2000 BC. It was a big family. That's what ChatGPT said their family looked like. They lived in a place called Hebron, about 60 k's away from Gaza, which you might have heard about. It's in the news a little bit. He had 12 sons, one daughter. Joseph was one of those sons. He had significant wealth. Living in ancient times was hard, and certainly this family and Jacob, the father, had gone through a lot of trial, but by now things were going pretty well. Had a good, wealthy situation. But buried beneath the facade of one big, happy family are some lingering generational sins. Bones that rose to the surface in the story of Joseph. Because Joseph, the 11th son of Jacob, was his favourite son. Favourite son to one of his 4 wives. And yes, 4 is too many wives. Let's read the story verbatim. I'm going to go fast and then we'll unpack a bit and then we'll apply it to today. So here's Joseph in his Technicolor dream coat, drawing the attention like he does. And here we go, Genesis. Let me read through this. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Yes, Joseph was dobbing on his brothers. We love that brother. Now, Israel loved Joseph. Israel is another name for Jacob. He had 2 names. So Jacob loved Joseph. Dad loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. That's going to go well because he had been born to him in his old age. So he made him an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf, which is like this big bale of hay, stood upright, and your bales of hay gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he said. We've used the word hated him 3 times in 4 verses here. It's going well. It's going well. Next verse. Then he had another dream. He told it to his brothers. Did he not learn the first time? Okay, tell him again. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. One day, Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him in the cistern, another word for a well. The cistern was empty, there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites, that's like a bunch of camels, coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his bros, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, I've got a better idea. Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he's our brother. So he's our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels. They got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it's your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It's my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of the Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. There you go, verbatim, quickly powered through. We'll do the other chunk another time. Here we have the story of how this family is going, and it's not going well. If one of your children sell one of your other children into slavery, that's a sure sign that something's gone wrong. And if they then lie about it and say that he's actually just dead, that's not a step up. That's not like, "Oh, we've sorted it out now." That's doubling down on the badness, right? This is a family in complete dysfunction. What I want to suggest, first of all, though, is that while there is a bunch of individual wrongdoing that has made up this event, and quite a full-on event at that, there's a bit more to it from a systemic level than maybe first meets the eye. What I would like to suggest is we maybe need to broaden our definition and understanding of what sin actually is. If you're new to Christianity, we believe in a thing called sin, the idea of failing to measure up, of wrongdoing. And I think in the Western church particularly, maybe as a result of kind of the culture we have of individualism in society today, we equate sin with just personal moral wrongdoing. So if you do something wrong, that's sin, and that's all there is to what sin is. Now, to be clear, it definitely is that. That is definitely what sin is. Sin is when we don't measure up. The word for sin in the original Hebrew, I can't pronounce it right, it's like kata or something like that. It literally means to miss. So if you're going to go home this afternoon and play darts and you missed, that would be kata, you've missed. You've missed the target. And so when we sin, there's a goal for where we should be aiming for and getting, and when we miss it, that's what sin is. And certainly on a personal level, we miss the mark all the time. We do things wrong all the time. But that is not all sin is. Sin is not just in here, it's also actually in all of you. So if it's just in me, that's something that I have to do and just in my own heart. But if it's also in you, then together, when we do stuff together, we actually create sinful systems as well as have sin in our heart. There's a systemic element to sin that is simply the nature of all of us being wrongdoers together. It's like this group project. Let's wreck the world together. In addition to that, God would say that when sin came into the world, it not just wrecked the systems, it not just wrecked the heart, but the entirety of creation is also somewhat cursed now. This is what happens when you go do the mowing and there's weeds in the lawn again. Despite having got that weed killer from Bunnings, it just doesn't work for long enough. So if we would have a full diagram here, we would have, yes, what is sin? It is personal moral failure. But in addition to that, it is systemic failures and a curse on all creation as well. What that sometimes means is that when there is wrongdoing, when we stuff up, and gosh, we do, I do, it's not always because you are a failure, though that is part of it. Sometimes there's something you're inheriting as well. C.S. Lewis puts it this way, and I like this way of putting it. He says, sometimes a sum can be put right, but only by going back till you find the error and working it afresh from that point, never by simply going on. Evil can be undone, but it cannot develop into good. Time does not heal it. The spell must be unwound bit by bit with backward mutters of dissevering power. In other words, sometimes the thing that we find ourselves in, the sin that we find ourselves in that we can't escape from, the thing we keep doing, and we keep trying to work in our own heart to do it, may have missed things that have happened to you and to generations past in your life that you are now just reliving and you don't even realize it. If we go back to our story, there are three major themes of terrible family behaviors: favoritism, feuding, and lies. In that story we read verbatim, all those things show up. But here's the thing you need to know. And if you want to go back and start your own little Genesis Bible study, here's a table that summarizes favoritism, feuding, and lies. On the left column, Joseph and Jacob, the story we just read. Favoritism, Jacob loved Joseph more. Feuding, I had a dream, you're all bowing down to me. The brothers hate him. Lies, they got Joseph's robe, dipped it in blood. We found this and see. But then if you go back to Granddad, Jacob's father, you'll find that Jacob is favored by the mother and Esau is favored by the father. You'll find in the feuding space, you'll find in the story of Isaac that Jacob stole his brother's birthright. You'll find that there were lies in that Jacob literally deceived his father into getting it. And then if we go back to his dad, great-granddad, we have more favoritism, more feuding, and more lies. I really only picked up on this when I read it again last year, when I read Genesis again. I'm like, oh my gosh, they just keep doing the same things. The same thing that Dad did, that Granddad did, that great-granddad here, and now we have Joseph. what's he going to do? We have this cycle of favoritism, feuding, and lies. It's not just in the heart of Joseph, it's in the family. We all know this is a thing. We even have idioms, heaps of them, about this idea. You might have heard them. It runs in the family. Like father, like son, a chip off the old block, cut from the same cloth. She's a spitting image. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We all know it in our hearts, it's a thing. It's in the Bible, it's a thing. It's also now becoming a thing in science. Fairly recent, actually. Maybe last 10 years, it's become a bit of a thing. They don't call it sin. You're not going to go and find an article in psychology today about sin. That's not a word that's used in outside of spiritual world, generally speaking. A word they often use instead is trauma or dysfunction. This is an article from Psychology Today talking about this very concept. Transgenerational trauma, they're calling it. Refers to a type of trauma that does not end with the individual. I love this phrase. Instead, it lingers and gnaws through one generation to the next. Families with a history of unresolved trauma, depression, anxiety, and addiction may continue to pass maladaptive coping strategies, another science word for doing the wrong thing, and distrustful views of life onto future generations. In this way, one can repeat the patterns and attitudes of former generations regardless of whether they are healthy or not. A study was done on mice, because that's what we always do the studies on, because to do it on people would be wrong. But they got these mice and they kind of gave them this smelly thing. I've got a picture of it here. There you go. It's cherry blossom smell. And whenever they gave the mice the cherry blossom smell, they gave it an electric shock. So nice, yeah, science. Then what they did is they saw that after a while, you wouldn't have to give the shock. It would have the same trauma response just from smelling, because it associated smelling with shock, and so you remove the shock and it still has the same fear response, even without the shock after a while. You get what I'm saying? Then the mice had babies, and they gave them the smell, and they had the same response, and even in the great grandchildren of the mice, without having to shock them. Isn't that just wild? Here's the cliff notes for you. Dias and Wrestler, 2013. Male mice feared a cherry blossom smell. Offspring, even grand offspring, showed heightened fear responses to the same smell without ever being exposed. The offspring had structural changes to the amygdala and olfactory bulb. Physiological impact, not just behavioural. Isn't that wild? That just messes me up. The idea that not only does generational sin pass its way through in our behaviours, but physically it can actually change the very design of your body. Carl Jung, who I often go to, says one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The latter procedure, however, is disagreeable and not very popular. Going into this space is not a comfortable space for us. I appreciate that. It's not been a fun topic to write about. But it's something I think we have neglected for too long. That perhaps what we're doing and how we're messing up needs to go back to its start and find out where it came from in the first place. 1 John 1:9 says, if we confess our sins, God is faithful and just to forgive us our sins. But not just that. He wants to cleanse us from all unrighteousness as well. It's not just about going, that's wrong, I'm sorry, and getting forgiveness, which is awesome. But God doesn't want to leave you in a place where you've done the wrong thing and you're forgiven. He wants you to actually get well. So, let's go a little heavier and then we'll lighten it up a bit. Here are some examples of what I'm talking about that might be more relevant to today. Examples of sin system dysfunctions that you may have experienced as a child that now are emerging in real life today. I want you to approach this with the right mindset here. This is not about guilt. This is about healing and about how we can move forward positively. All right, so if your childhood experience was with withholding affection, it may be, and it's not always, this is not a this equals that. And your version of this may be totally different, but sometimes, often enough that I could find enough information to justify this list, right? Okay? Sometimes that looks like struggle with vulnerable intimacy. If you experienced anger or violence in your family, you might have a life now of hypervigilance and overprotectiveness. If you had a childhood experience of addiction, there may be shame cycles and secrecy that you are now living out. If you had a child experience of workaholism, you may now believe that your worthiness of love is directly related to the level of success that you can portray in the way you do things. If you lived in favoritism, you may then be ongoingly resentful towards anyone who's doing okay, because that kind of is a bit of a triggering thing. Or the other way, you're doing well and think that you deserve it because you're the favourite one. Unresolved grief. So if a family member, they say, has a grief experience that they haven't resolved, they may project that onto their children in the expectation that that child will help them through their grief. In so doing, who now becomes the parent? The child is now having to become the parent. And that child then loses any opportunity to actually be a child and potentially for the rest of their life feel that they are parenting their parent. Or unprocessed poverty, sometimes the way that emerges is that you actually, whenever you're doing okay, you make decisions that ruin it. Probably unconsciously, maybe consciously. But you're doing well and you don't think you're supposed to be doing well, and so you deliberately stop doing well and don't take that risk for that thing that you know you could do, but you're not willing to try because somehow suffering is more loyal to the family that you grew up with than being successful now. I reckon you could probably count one in every single one here. And not just the one you received, probably one you're giving. I'm a parent, I know I'm giving it. I'm a recipient of this, and I'm a giver of this. I don't want this to be a guilt story, because this should be a shared narrative. We're all in this one. This is not a case of some of us are on happy land where we all did really well, and we can judge those who don't and aren't. No, we're all in this together. Dan Siegel wrote a cracking book, The Whole Brain Child. Says this: the best predictor of a child's security of attachment is not what happened to his parents as children, but rather how his parents made sense of those childhood experiences. In other words, the trauma is a given. It's what you do with it that counts. From Proverbs, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. We've got to do something about it. For Joseph to become all God wants for him, he must be the one to process the generational sin in his family. That's the story here. He's got to be the one. He's got to be the one. Curiously enough, I think that the way that God does this, time and time again, is through what I'd call deep work. In God's story, the path to growth is almost always through wilderness. In the house I used to live in, one day, we noticed that there was some funny things about the house. They had lots of sensor lights everywhere, like heaps of them. I'm like, what the heck is going on with the sensor lights everywhere? You couldn't go outside at any time without a light coming on. We didn't even know where the switches were. We lived in there for years. We could never work out these lights. Sorry. And another thing that was weird about it is there were vents in every room. You know how you get a vent in a shed to take the hot air out? There were those in every single bedroom. There was a vent in the roof. It turns out that this family once, who lived there before, had almost been broken into. And so that's why there were security lights there. I had no idea. But there I was, living in this security light world. No idea that was the story. Eventually found out one day. And then the other thing with the vents thing, it turns out that one of the family members was just a little bit paranoid about sickness. And they read on the internet somewhere that getting hot air out of the room makes people healthier. So they put vents in every single bedroom because that would make people healthy. This is the thing, you don't even know the story behind the thing that you're doing until you do the work to find the story behind the thing that you're doing. And my experience of God is that when you decide you want to do the deep work, The place that tends to happen in is a place that I would call wilderness. Chris Russell, good thinker, says it this way: throughout the Bible, we see that God chooses again and again to form his people in the wilderness. It is the furnace of transformation, the place where our facades, illusions, fantasies, and props are removed and we come face to face with our nothingness. In the wilderness, God strips us of our independence and rebellion and teaches us to depend on him. And in the Old Testament particularly, but also somewhat in the New, there's just less narrative in the New Testament. There's less stories to tell. But you see time and time again that when a person in that story needs to move through something, where do they go? To the wilderness. Literally, Joseph gets thrown in a well. Like, there's a literal element to your deep work that you see in these old stories that is also metaphorical at the same time. Sometimes we need to get thrown into a well. I remember one of my many well-throwing experiences. For those of you who know me, I have 4 sons. They're awesome. My 4th son has significant disabilities. When he was born, I had dreams about my career. I quite like politics, if you don't know me. I think that's fun. I was just hoping, actually I was running for federal parliament at the time. And then I had this child who was in special care for 60 days, trying to run for parliament while having a kid in intensive care. Doesn't work so good. I held on probably about 40 or 50 days before I finally made the call that I just can't do this, I've got to pull out. And I remember in my backyard, the phone rang. It was my campaign manager. And she'd clearly been told that you need to call Michael and convince him to quit because this is crazy. And I remember walking in the backyard, just up and down the hill, talking to this lady. I had delayed this conversation for a long time because I knew what it was going to end in, and I just didn't want to go there. Here's the weirdest thing. When I got there, when I was having that conversation, it was weirdly peaceful. It was weirdly kind. Not that the lady on the other end of the phone was particularly kind, but the act of going, I'm going to shed all this and just be me again, was weirdly beautiful. I don't know if you've ever had those moments where you've had to let go of the things that you've been doing your whole life to cope and to prove that you're worth something, and then those things disappear. Like, I thought success was the thing that makes me worthy. And I shed the thing that was making me successful, and I've got no success anymore. And God saw me in my rawness, and he felt closer than he'd felt for a long time. Sometimes controversial to quote this guy in an evangelical church, and I get it why. But sometimes he's so good. Richard Rohr: in times of failing or failure, many of us finally allow the great divine gaze, which is word for God, to looking at you. In times of failing or failure, many of us finally allow the divine gaze because we need it to get through the next hour. Like any true mirror, the gaze of God receives us exactly as we are, without judgment or distortion, subtraction or addition. And such perfect receiving is what transforms us. Being totally received as we truly are is what we wait for and long for all of our lives. When you shed all that stuff that you've been doing as a coping mechanism, the favoritism, the deceit, the lies, and it's just you, and you can't pretend that you're great anymore, God loves that person. Julian of Norwich: first the fall, and then the recovery from the fall, and both are the mercy of God. To put it back into this narrative, the reality is that Joseph must lose the coat of many colours before he's fit to wear the Pharaoh's robes. There's some lies and favoritism and rivalry in his cycle, but identification of that brings a chance to end the cycle. Recently, a friend of mine who actually goes to this church released a film called Seen. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's really good. It's a documentary about Redcliffe families mostly, who encounter their own family trauma and decide for themselves that they want to make a way. I give that a shout out because Sam Jockle, who's the lady on the right there, she's the producer of this film and she goes to our church. If you see her around, ask her about it. It's well worth your time. It's just a little side note. Here are my main ideas. I've literally called this slide main ideas. In church world, I'm supposed to put like dot points with like like alliteration or something. I can't frame this in that way. So here's actual prose to try and get to where I want us to land today. But number one, both generational dysfunction and personal moral choices war against our connection to and dependence on God and may choke the receiving of the fullness of his promises. I reckon many of us have not given due attention to one of those two things. God's path to freedom is not up and light, but down and deep. It's through wilderness and desert, and I think we all know this. I think that's a universal. We all know if you want to deal with that, it's not necessarily just going to be fun, easy street. But, last one, if we bravely name the past, we may commence a cycle of blessing. Honest confession and grace doesn't erase the past, but it can begin to redeem it. Next week, all I've talked about today is identification, diagnosis. Next week we'll talk about healing. I want to just do a quick skip. So here we've got identification, skip along. Joseph eventually gets married and has kids. And in the Old Testament, they made a big deal of what you name your kids. And these are the names he gave his kids. He gave the names Manasseh and Ephraim. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, "It's because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." In other words, part of Joseph's healing at the end of all this is evidenced in his children's names. He was able to escape the cycle and literally name a child after it. The second son he named Ephraim and said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." Joseph was able to say, and this boy, he means doubly fruitful. That journey I've had to go through equals more blessing than I've ever had in my entire life. How we get there, we'll find out next week. But I'm telling you, it's a positive story. There is healing to be had if we are willing to go through diagnosis. So what I'd like to do to finish today is something a bit old school. We're going to do a call and response prayer. You can find this in an Anglican church if you've ever been to one of those. We don't often do it in Baptist world. There's some power in this. What this is going to do is I'm going to give you all of a chance to pray a prayer that basically just says, I'm going to let this be a thing that I'm allowing myself to do. I'm going to let this be a thing. Because I've not let it be a thing because I don't want to deal with it, but today I'm going to let it be a thing. We're processing stuff that I've inherited that I'm now doing wrong and I need to do something about. I'm going to actually start that journey. So if we can get everyone up on our feet. And this is how I want us to do it, right? Like, I'm going to say, if you could go to the next slide for me. I'm going to say the lines that are on the left, and then the ones on the right, you just have to say it. It's the same line over and over, so you'll get it right. It's all good. And I want you to basically just go, okay, God, if this is a thing I need to deal with, I'm going to hand over to you the power to do it. I'm going to release this a little bit. If you want to physically do it, you're very welcome to. If you want to do a bit of these guys, saying I'm literally going to hand over, you're very welcome to do that. Here we go. God of time, we have carried our past in our hands. God of grace, we hand it to you. God of power, we have foolishly gripped to old ways. God of grace, we hand it to you. God of secrets, we have chosen silence and hid our shame. God of grace, we hand it to you. God of healing, we harbour wounds and hold weapons that wound. God of grace, we hand it to you. God of family, we are ready to not hold it anymore. If I've touched a nerve for yourself or for someone else and you want a bit extra prayer for you, there's a space up the back that you can go to while this song plays. Someone will happily pray for you. Let me pray for you all now. Heavenly Father, we know that we are inheriting stuff that we need to deal with. We don't talk about it enough, but today we walk into that space. God, thank you for carrying it. There'll be some in this room today for whom this was the first time they said, God, I'm going to give it to you. God, you took it all. You took it all on the cross. If we hand it to you, you are a good God and you can bring not only forgiveness but healing. You can make us well again. If I pray, God, that we can start that journey, if that's a journey we need to go on today. Amen. Thank you.
Guys, thanks for watching. We really hope you enjoyed that. Two quick things before we go, okay? One, we'd love to connect with you. go to our website, lifepoint.org.au, hit connect, and just give us your details. Someone from our church will be in contact with you. And the second thing is, if you live in the area around the kind of Moreton Bay or North Brisbane, come along to a service, 8:30, 10 o'clock and 5 p.m. We'd absolutely love to see you here on a Sunday.